Hey, what's going on? What's going on, people? Hey, was it good? Came to talk some boxing history. Cheers. Cheers to all. Cheers to all who are going to be joining. Maybe some will join. Those who will be listening. Maybe some will listen here in the aftermath, all that good stuff. But hey, gonna be here. Talk a little boxing history, baby. And didn't really have a particular format, but just gonna get it in. We're gonna talk whatever boxing history, some subjects, some things that have been on the mind as it relates to boxing, all that good stuff. So you can feel free to chime in, join in, drop any questions. Let it be known how you feel. We're gonna discuss it. We've got one person in here right now. Salute to you, one person, or could that be me? Theories. But anyway, yeah, appreciate everyone. Of course, 86 Boxing representing. We need a little bit more boxing history in our lives. Of course, we get a lot of the modern stuff that takes place. It goes down, and hey, we've got a slew of it that we can choose from. I mean, a number of channels, that's what they are geared towards. Salute to my man Dan out there. Hey, I'm doing well, Dan. Hope you're good. Hope you're good doing your thing there, Dan. Hope you're in good health, all that. Holding it down. Came to talk some boxing history, Dan. Any boxing history. We need more of that in our lives, right? Yeah, we have a lot of the other stuff. Hey, cheers to my buddy Brian Duncan there. The Ice Punch. Salute to you there, Brian. Appreciate you dropping by, buddy. Hey, Brian Duncan, folks. If you don't know, check him out. You check out The Ice Punch. I have the book there. I got to get you on here, Brian, so we can talk some Ice Punch in the history surrounding that epic story. And for those that are fans of the Titanic, I think you'll enjoy it. So you get a mixture of boxing and the Titanic. So what more could you ask for right there? There's some of the best you can ask for. So great seeing you here, Brian. Hey, Brian and I had a lot of conversations on boxing history here in the past. And yeah, he put me on game to a lot of stuff. I'll be privy to a lot of fighters. So some good stuff. Good seeing you here, Brian. Awesome, Dan. Yeah, of course. Awesome being back there, Dan. Being able to chat with the Surrealist Idealist. Salute to you there, buddy. Appreciate you dropping by there. Check them out, folks. Surrealist Idealist. Hey, always good having you drop by there, Surrealist Idealist. A lot of good questions, good comments, things of that nature when you're on the vids and all that. So I appreciate you for sure there. Surrealist folks in the building. Brian says we will do it. Yes, sir. We will do it there, Brian. Ice Punch, a good one. As mentioned, if you haven't checked that book out, folks, you can check it out. Check on Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, all those bookstores. Ice Punch is a good read as well. It doesn't take you forever to get through it either. You know, it's a nice book just in general. And it has some very interesting backstories tied to it. And as mentioned, if you're a fan of the Titanic, and you're a boxing fan, then what more could you ask for right there? You get the Titanic and you get boxing mixed in one. I mean, that's amazing right there. I don't want to spoil it. I know some people don't like spoilers, but I think you'll really enjoy the overall story, backdrop, everything surrounding it. So I salute Brian Duncan for bringing that story to light. I remember he pursued it and he jumped on it and he was on it. Skywalker Boxing, salute to you there, Skywalker Boxing. Hey, appreciate you dropping by, buddy. If you haven't checked out Skywalker Boxing, folks, check out Skywalker Boxing. As a matter of fact, he does his thing there on his channel. Get a lot of good content, a lot of good interviews, all that good stuff. He said he was about to text me there. All right, got you there, Skywalker. Cool. Yeah, in the mix right now, talking a little boxing history. So appreciate you dropping by there, Skywalker. Of course, we do this Tim and Tim show when it comes on, usually at 9 p.m. On certain days, all that good stuff. So, hey, be sure to be in the mix there, folks, for sure. Bruce Gas, Boxing, Jazz, and more. Appreciate you there, Bruce. Salute to you. Another one you need to check out right there, folks, if you're in the boxing, entertainment, history, all that good stuff. Bruce Gas has you covered right there. So be sure to check out his channel. Go over there, subscribe, check out some videos, give him a like, all that good stuff. I think you'll enjoy it for sure. You heard it here first. If not, you heard it on some other channels. but he's worth checking it out. So Skywalker says we're doing the Tim and Tim show in a couple of hours, so that'll be 9 p.m. Eastern, folks. If you want to hear more, we're beyond just the history aspect, drop by the Tim and Tim show. So I'll be in attendance there. We'll have Skywalker, Bruce Gas, Boxing Jazz, and more. Hey, and it should be good. Sending you an email. Okay, got you there, Skywalker. But cool. Appreciate you. Hey, it'll be cool to do that show. But yeah, here, folks, just wanted to talk a little bit of boxing history, of course. You know the eras that I like to chime in on. Go way back, the times of the John L. Sullivans of the world and the Peter Jacksons of the world. That's going back there, right? That's going pretty far back. 1800s right there. We had some good boxing that was taking place then. And a lot of it is documented. And it's well documented. We have a lot of accounts that are in the newspapers. There have been books written about some of the fighters from those times. You name them, some of the top guys, they got their start there during those particular eras. And it's a fun one to talk about. A lot of characters. Each of them could have their own story and book. Dan mentions the man Frank Sullivan. Yes, he's one of them. An Australian guy, big puncher. One could argue a Jack Dempsey, heavyweight Jack Dempsey, before Jack Dempsey in some sense. A little bit bigger. Well, height-wise, at least, he's around 6'3". Dempsey's around 6'1". So, Slavin, a big punching heavyweight from Australia. And one thing I always said is, certainly when you're going back in those time frames, that era, if you were going to be anything at heavyweight, you had to fight Australians because they were very much in the mix at that particular time. And they had a lot of the top guys in that period or during that period, in that era. A lot of the top heavyweights, they came from Australia. So if you were thinking about contending, you were looking to get to championship status, you were likely going to run into an Australian, someone the likes of a Frank Slavin, who, as I mentioned, was a big-time puncher from that period. So it's good times there to be a heavyweight. You had a lot of competition to go from or to dive into. So that helped things. No, Poland ball 69 in the building. Whoa, talk about long time no see there. Poland ball, what the heck? Where you been, man? Salute to you there, Poland ball. Check them out, folks. Poland ball, yeah, we go way back. It seems like. Good to have you in here. Cheers to you there, buddy. Long time, of course. Shouted you out in the video here not too long ago. Can't remember which one it was, but one video. Not Poland ball, but you know the deal. You know the deal there. Poland ball asks, hey, 86, can you rank? How would you rank these fellas from best to worst? Jackson, Sullivan, Slavin, Goddard. Worst Goddard, but certainly you could argue the toughest there being Goddard. Now, he was in with a hell of a lot of competition, and yeah, he took some losses, but hey, he hung in there for sure. So I would say that he would certainly be the worst of that bunch. That being said, if you look at his resume, man, what more can you ask for right there with a guy like that? I mean, a guy who would fight them all, essentially. First in the bunch for me is going to be, no doubt, my man, the Black Prince, Peter Jackson. I think you just look at his all-around skill set, what he was to the game at that particular time, how he was viewed, how people saw him, the light he was held in. He was considered to be one of, if not the most skilled boxer out there, and he was a heavyweight. That throws another bit of emphasis towards it right there when you're a heavyweight operating at that level, because of the fact that, hey, you know, we hear the stories of the sweet science and how it was in the olden times in whether or not these guys were skilled. Well, I'll tell you 100% they were. And you'd be hard-pressed to find one more skilled and athletic than the Black Prince Peter Jackson, heavyweight operating at that time around 200 pounds. So he was not just any heavyweight or run-of-the-mill guy. I mean, he had the resume to back it as well. He was in with a lot of these guys mentioned here. Of course, he couldn't get Sullivan. That's who he wanted, and would have gotten an opportunity at him had the time came or had the opportunity presented itself and Sullivan accepted, which, of course, that's a drawback for sure. And so he gets lost in the shuffle sometimes because of that, but certainly probably the best heavyweight of that era. And there were a lot of good heavyweights in that era. Then it would come down to Sullivan and Slavin for number two. You could argue, I think there's a case that could be made for either. It would have been good to have seen Sullivan take on a guy like Frank Slavin. Man, it certainly would have been one to. It's one that leaves you wondering. You look at kind of Frank Slavin had some things going in his favor. He was a big time puncher. I wonder how Sullivan would deal with it. I might lean Sullivan at number two there and then Slavin behind him, but I can see that being switched in some capacity. And we know Slavin and Jackson went at it, and Jackson handled him, of course. I think that Sullivan would have maybe the power to be able to do some things there to upset the apple cart. Well, not necessarily upset, considering he'd be the favorite, but I think that Sullivan would probably be able to touch up Slavin, and who knows, he could potentially get a stoppage. By that same token, I do think that Slavin could hurt Sullivan as well because he was the type of guy. Then it would come down to kind of the tactics of the fight in itself, but I'd probably lean Sullivan. So with that, kind of in the order that you have them there, Poland Ball, Jackson, Sullivan, Slavin, Goddard. I think that's probably appropriate in where many would have them for the most part. Some might have Sullivan above Jackson, though I think that Jackson would have edged him out there slightly. There are a lot of things in Jackson's favor that I feel that would have given him the edge there against Sullivan. Dan mentions Harry Lang and Bill Fernan, Joe Goddard. Yep, certainly. Harry Lang, I think he only had that one loss, right? Or somewhere around there, but he was a very good fighter. New Zealand, was he New Zealand? A New Zealander, actually? I'm trying to remember if he's a New Zealander, if I'm mixing him with someone else. He might have been New Zealander, which is right there with Australia, basically intertwined, essentially. So, yeah, Harry Lang, another good one. Bill Fernan, another pioneer, I guess you can say, from that period. Definitely holding it down over there in Australia. I think he has 2 wins over Peter Jackson. When Peter Jackson was trying to come up in those ranks and, hey, couldn't get through Fernan. I mean, Fernan, he was legit, and he was someone that theoretically paths could have crossed with Sullivan at some point, though it didn't happen. So Fernan, a guy certainly worth mentioning, and he was a good boxer. And he held that Australian heavyweight title for a good period. And he's someone that gets kind of left out now when you're thinking about heavyweights from that era, but certainly someone worth mentioning there, Dan. I think you did a great point in bringing him up. Bowling Ball says, I think Jackson had the best resume out of the bunch, but reading about Prime Sullivan from people who saw him make him seem like a bat out of hell, a freak talent. Yeah, there are some things that certainly make you lean towards Sullivan in some cases. And, and I have to mention, I have this video out there. Some of you may have seen it where I did a little prime for prime matchup between Sullivan and Peter Jackson. And if you look at it through the end, I actually had Sullivan coming out on top in that video. I've since changed my sort of prediction or my thoughts surrounding it. I haven't updated the video in that sense, but yeah, Sullivan, man, he was one of those guys who he took the boxing world by storm. He wasn't huge in terms of the size of these heavyweights you see today, but at around 5'10", 5'11", you say around 200 pounds, or at least close to there in his fighting prime. And Benny, he was a guy who was thick up top, and he had a punch to him. He came out offensive fighter, and he was getting a lot of guys out of there, and he had the experience on his side from the standpoint of a lot of these traveling sort of 4-rounders he would do. So he was most certainly a guy who was out there and gained a lot of experience just from fighting, even if it were these sort of kind of off the cusp, off the record fights in some sense. But you got to think that stuff adds up. Cheers there to Gaming with Flyhopper. Hey, appreciate your gaming with Flyhopper. Hey, thanks for dropping by, buddy, and leaving comments on videos, all that good stuff. Good to have you in the mix here. Appreciate you for sure. Check them out, folks. If you're into gaming, definitely one to check out. Surrealist Idea said, but it was arguably fighters like Dempsey and Greb who brought the art of longer and faster combination punches to a whole new level of mastery. Certainly, you can say such. You can say such for sure. There, I'm thinking you're talking about the heavyweight Dempsey there, Surrealist Idealist, but of course Harry Greb. I mean, yeah, he was one of those guys who was all over the place from all indications. I mean, the Pittsburgh windmill, throwing punches left and right, up and down, all over. I mean, yeah, he was one of those guys that put punches in bunches in some sense. And I think that's what elevated him, that gas tank that he had, because he wasn't a guy who had power, who had pop or anything of that nature. So he had to do a lot of his trade right there in the mix. So he would battle it out, bang out with you. So certainly that was one. Then Dempsey, of course, when you think about the heavyweights and seeing him on film, just seeing what he was able to do, I mean, he elevated the game for sure. Made you want to come and see him, made you want to come and see that offense. He took it to another level right there. Of course, we had guys who could punch, but seeing what Dempsey was doing there on film, that took things to a brand new height right there and elevated the popularity of the sport. And that's why he was most certainly one of the most popular, one of the most famous individuals in the world during his reign, because they saw what he can do for sure. Bowling Ball says it's a shame Sullivan never fought Jackson, Slavin, and Goddard. However, he was a shot fighter at this point, and people doubted he'd even be able to get back in shape for Kilrain. True. That is a good point you mentioned there, Bowling Ball. Yeah, for Sullivan, man, so much of what could have been, and he came. And certainly when he went out, it was basically around the time that we ran into a situation where the cameras started to pop up. The video was going to be popping up here shortly thereafter. Well, just a few years down the road, not too far. And Sullivan was pretty much done for. And the thing about it, he was in his 30s. He would have been in his late 30s, really, realistically, when we'd have started to see more filmed action or whatnot, but it didn't matter because Sullivan was pretty much done at that point, about 33, or a little bit before that, really. He was already a done fighter, no longer the same guy. But you're right there. It took William Muldoon to get him ready for a Kilrain, Greco-Roman fighter, former Greco-Roman fighter, a guy who was over the Madison Square Garden at one point too, like the commission there. And hey, he had to take Sullivan to a camp out in the midst of nowhere, or whatever you want to call it, but some town out there, and ultimately whip him into shape. And it wasn't without a lot of struggle, I would say. So yeah, it is unfortunate we didn't get to see that Jackson, Slavin, or Goddard. And man, just think of what would have been. We'd have more pictures for sure of those contests. But that Jackson contest, man, that would have been the standard for that period right there. That would have been the standard for the 1800s as far as heavyweight contests, because I think it would have surpassed some of the stories of even the fights before it had that happened. But we didn't get it. Damage in Sullivan, Slavin, Lang, Fernan, Goddard, Martin, Buffalo, Costello, Pablo, Funk, Starlight Rollins. I know Starlight. Oh, yeah, Mickey Dooley. Yeah, remember Mickey? Jim Hall. Yes. Of course, the best by Fitzsimmons all down under except for Sullivan. Oh, yeah, certainly. Some names you there. Some good names you mentioned there. It's the guys with a lot of experience for sure. A lot of fights under the belts there. And, of course, we know Bob Fitzsimmons there held it down, did his thing right there. And he had ties to Jim Mace, the great Jim Mace, seemingly discovering him through one of his tournaments. And, hey, we know what Bob Fitzsimmons was able to do. Probably, Yeah, of that bunch. Yeah, pound for pound, probably the biggest puncher of that bunch for sure. But a lot of names right there. So these guys were heavy players there. I don't know Buffalo Castello like that or Pablo, but I know the other guys for sure. So, gotta dive into those two a bit more there. Dan, I know you put us on game with some people there for sure. Cyrilus Idilla said, I've always wondered about this. It meant to ask during your excellent Johnson versus Dempsey video. I've heard conflicting information about how people fought before Dempsey's era. Yeah, I think if we look at what's on video, you see things operating in more of a slower capacity. I would say Cyrilus Idealis there. Just thinking about it from that standpoint, the game was a little bit slower in terms of how, if we're thinking about these heavyweights for sure, how they fought, outside of some of the accounts you hear from Sullivan, that he would be quick out the gates, just there going for that knockout. But just thinking about it in some of the fights, especially those we have on video, you have a little bit of that. But I wouldn't say that was always the case, because you even think about a guy like Tommy Burns. He was in there and he was able to knock out some of these guys. Now you could question the level of competition for some of the guys that he was going up against, but he was a guy who, stylistically, he would go in there looking for the knockout as well. And despite his size being one of the shorter heavyweights, he found a way of getting it done right there, coming in, bringing that right hand over the top, So Tommy Burns was one of those guys who you could say was offensive in some sense. Bob Fitzsimmons offensive, but yeah, you look at the video of him and Corbett was a little bit slower as far as how it went about, but when he can land, he can certainly hurt you, punch you. Then you had other guys that were out there. Jackson, for instance, he was mentioned to be the total package right there. He had the speed, athleticism, he had the power, all that, a mix of all of that. Unfortunately, we don't have any video of him, but that being said, he seemed to have all of that. We know of Corbett. He can move pretty decently as far as being a heavyweight. He was on the lighter side of the heavyweights as well. We know he had solid footwork, had good distance and timing. So I think it was a mixed bag, but I think that Dempsey was one who certainly elevated it, especially from that championship level there in terms of what we were able to see from him on video. Jack Johnson, he operated more at a slower pace for sure. So we had a number of years where he was the guy. Same with Jeffries. Jeffries operated more at a slower pace, but I think that was just naturally how it was. But you could see when he and we only have a little bit of footage, when he and the Fighting Sailor, Tom Sharkey, when they were going at it, you could see they had a little bit more back and forth that were tied to them. Some tying up, but they were going at it, and they had multiple fights. So I'd imagine those were fought at a pace that was a little bit more expedient for James Jeffries. That being said, yeah, some of it was stylistic, pace of it, and then factoring in the rounds, the length of time in which they were going to go, all that good stuff. So yeah, all of that could have factored in. Salute. Like everybody, I didn't send the is it in the right order? Cyrilus Idilla, hey, appreciate you there, buddy. Cyrilus Idilla is with the super chat there. Appreciate you there, buddy. I wanted to show that for sure. Salute to you. Yeah, I'm gonna finish that question for sure there, Cyrilus Idilla. Cyrilus Idilla said Mike Tyson mentioned that Johnson's defensive style became outdated by the 1920s. I guess you could say, especially if you look at it from the standpoint of how he operated in terms of his was tied to a lot of clinching, really, and then the game in itself kind of changed in that sense. They weren't, I would say, you didn't see as much clinching in that same capacity as far as what Johnson was able to do during his reign compared to kind of where things are. Of course, we still see clinching, things of that nature, holding, but Johnson's defense, it did predicate on him being able to control a fighter, and he would do so with clinching. So that's when you see a lot of his videos. When he gets in, he'll maybe get off a couple of punches, then he's tying up the arms of the fighter, and the fighter is unable to really get off their punches. They're struggling, trying to land something, and he was strong enough, big enough to be able to nullify what offense they were trying to put up or put forth So you could argue that that style specifically did become a bit outdated in any of those. Some of that might have been virtue of just how the boxing game shifted in some sense there as well. But like I said, it wasn't the end of clinching in general, because you had guys like Sammy Angot, known as the clutch, and that was because he clinched a lot. I think it's just the capacity you saw it with Johnson, where hey, you could spend the better part of a minute or so just basically stopping a guy from being able to land their punches or whatnot. That might have gone by the wayside there, Surrealist, Idealist. From my perspective, my opinion, some others might have some thoughts on it. Bill Fernan exactly 2 wins over Prime Jackson. Indeed, there, Dan, indeed. So he's a guy who certainly is worthy of being mentioned, especially when you think about those great Australian heavyweights. So he has wins over Jackson. Surrealist Idealist said, because the fighters after Johnson never learned to throw longer and faster combinations to follow up when their first few punches were blocked. Yeah, you could say that was the case there. I would say in some of the smaller weights, we saw what would be that style of fighting. And I think there's probably some parallels, but also some differences between heavyweight and some of the smaller weights. You take a guy like Joe Gans, really, and just think about how he was stylistically. And some of the videos that we had of him, he was a guy who could throw combinations, all of that stuff. He was good with distance. He could fight on the inside as well, as we saw in this contest was battling Nelson. He had pop. We saw him knock out Kid Herman with, I believe it was a right hook, almost kind of stepping back, catching him with a right hook as he dipped. And that's one of the great knockouts that we have in history right there, and it's on film. So I think that it depended right there, Surrealist Idealist, in terms of the weight in some of the fighters. But certainly when you think about the marquee heavyweights, yeah, there was a period where you had guys like Jeffries Johnson, and they may have had similarities in that sense in terms of the pace and then how they operated, and probably some of the guys in and around there. But Johnson, he could be offensive at points, and whenever he put things together in an offensive manner, he did have the style to be able to get a fighter out of there, but that wasn't necessarily his go-to, especially there in the latter part of his career. But he was in a lot of contests with some top-level guys there, so which we had more of that on film, a lot of the stuff from early on, because I do think that Johnson was also – he operated a little bit differently there during his reign as well. And we didn't get to see him with the best competition per se there during that period. So I think that kind of factors in. Cheers there, Sir Lucifer Vampiro. Appreciate you there. Jackson is too smooth and skillful for Sullivan. Hey, appreciate you dropping by, Sir Lucifer. Hey, always great to have your comments and everything on the videos. Hey, you provide some great insight there, buddy. So appreciate seeing you. But yeah, I think I'm with you there. I think Jackson would be a little bit too smooth and skillful for him. And I think Jackson would be able to go the distance as well. So Sullivan, he has an advantage over some fighters with him being able to take things further down the distance in the fighting game. But Jackson, he's someone that could do that as well. You know, Jackson went 61 rounds with James J. Corbett. And from all indications, it got the better of Corbett, even though it was ruled a draw. And I think that goes to show that, hey, Jackson was one of those guys, man. He was top level, elite, skilled fighter, and would have been a tough outing for anyone during that period for sure. Surrealist Idealist said, I've also seen claims that fighters learned to do this before Johnson's era. Yeah, if you're talking about because fighters after Johnson era learned to throw longer. Yeah, certainly. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You can have fighters who can punch for sure there prior to Johnson's era. Yeah, I think Johnson, when it comes to him, you have to look at it from the light of it being heavyweight. So I think heavyweight, it can be its own thing there, just given that we're talking about these bigger guys and that being sort of the marquee division. It has always been the marquee division really in the history of boxing, even though it's had its ups and downs. but I think you can look at the heavyweights in a different light than some of the lower weights, you know. And I think when it comes to heavyweights, you might see mention of some of these situations where, you know, it seemed that they weren't up to snuff or par in some areas where some of these lower weight fighters were. And I think it really depended on who was really controlling the heavyweight airwaves at that particular time. You know, Sullivan isn't known to be a guy who was very skilled or whatnot, but he was an offensive fighter. He had some skill. He knew about feigning, all of that good stuff. So make no mistake about it, he could fight. He came in there, he could strategize where he needed to, and that's what allowed him, at least in the world of bare knuckle, to get those victories that he was able to get. So they could think in there, but we don't know him to be one of those guys. So he'd get thrown in sort of like the brawler category. Johnson would get thrown in kind of a defensive fighter, not very offensive. But I think a lot of that is largely based on what we have on film for Johnson. And yeah, what we see on film is certainly not a version of him that is very offensive in that sense. We saw what he was able to do to Tommy Burns when he actually went for the knockout. So imagine some of that from a prior Johnson. Kind of the film Johnson is Johnson sort of in his prime right there for sure, as he became champion. But there are also a version of him as he was entering his prime early on, a younger Johnson that I think might have looked a little bit different than what we saw on film for sure. Just given the stakes and the different things involved with boxing in the heavyweight division and fighting for the championship at that particular time. Surrealist, maybe the full picture is longer combinations did before Johnson era, so wouldn't totally be surprised to encounter them, Surrealist says, but it was arguably fighters like Dipsy and Grep who brought the art of longer and faster combination punching to a whole new level of mastery. Yeah, I think you could say so. I don't know if it was solely just them. I think they are, well, in the case of Dipsy, yeah, he's one of those guys on film who did so. But I think about a guy who we don't have on film, did a video on him, Tommy Ryan. He was known for combination punches. He was light on his feet, could move very well, very skilled, welterweight and middleweight champion. And we don't have any footage of him, unfortunately, at least no footage of him when he was younger or fighting. We just have footage of him as he was older doing an interview or whatnot. But he was one of those guys who was well before these two individuals who was known to have that level of skill. And he could do it in these. He's got fights that were around 5 hours. One of his fights with, can't think of the welterweight at the time, but it was around 5 hours. And he had some other longer fights, and he was in with some high-level competition. And he was one of those guys that, if you read up on the accounts of how he fought, could move very well. He could jump in there, blast you out with some combinations, then back out. And I think that kind of falls in line with what you're thinking with the likes of Dipsy Greb and Tommy Ryan, often not mentioned amongst the greatest welterweights, let alone boxers in history. But he's one of those guys who was, at that particular time, one of the best you'd seen. Talking late 1800s, early 1900s. So he would have came before them for sure. Polo Mall says, I don't think Tyson or Custer appreciated techniques of Johnson's eras and how the glove size and rule differences impacted the way they fought. Yeah, I can see that for sure there, Polo Ball. I can see that. There were certainly some difference. There are some things that's mentioned that were allowed then that aren't necessarily allowed now in that same capacity, at least. Surrealist idealist and popularized it into a new normal for the rest of the century. So, yeah, it did become a popularized thing. Surrealist, I don't see many heavyweights throwing long and fast combinations like that in today's era. Yeah, some of these guys are bigger, slower, you could argue. Think about guys like Joe Joyce or whatnot. Yeah, he's not a fast guy. He doesn't really throw combinations like that. He kind of bludgeons you, you know, the jab, throw in a straight, something like that. Tyson Fury, he can throw some combinations here and there. Usyk, he can when he needs to, you know, but he's one of those guys, boxers, really predicates his offense on kind of timing and making sure he gets in the right spot. So, yeah, you could argue that that's not the case. Anthony Joshua, he can when he needs to at points. We've seen him throw combinations, some of those longer combinations, but yeah, for sustained periods, probably not as much to the degree that Dempsey would go at it. Probably, not as much. We saw with Joe Louis, he's a guy, he could operate slower, but when he started to get off his combinations, especially those short ones on the inside, when he went for it, man, he went for it. And he was one of those guys, he could get you out of there. His technique was top tier, and I mentioned this before, but Scrapbook Boxing did a great job. I think he's done it on multiple videos, but for sure breaking down that technique of Joe Louis, how everything, foot placement and everything, that was all intentional. So he looked slow on his feet, but trust me, he knew what he was doing in there for sure. Poland Ball says Steve Lott, Jim Jenkins, and Cuts apparently used to look down on many old timers for their low hand placement, but high hand placement is less logical with such tiny gloves. Yeah, I guess you could say so there, Poland Ball, for sure. Hey, we see some of those guys today that still have low hand placement, and it works out for them. You look at the way when Tate was in his bag, as I say, when he was there with Frank Martin or in that contest, hey, he was walking in with his hands low because he had him right here about where, you saw the likes of Tony Tepez or whatnot, and he was ready to get off right there. So that just shows an example for sure there, Poland Ball. You can see combination punching from Gans and Langford in the 1900s, 1910s, and applied in a skillful way. Surely, yeah, you mentioned Poland Ball, mentions Langford. Yeah, think about like that. Look at that fight with Bill Lang. He had Bill Lang on the back foot pretty much for the entirety of the fight. And when Langford was able to corner him because he was cutting him off, he would get off combination, bloop, bloop, just catching him. And Lang was out of there. He was like a dart getting out of there. He dropped him a couple of times. It's not the entire footage, but you get to see a good deal of it. But yeah, Langford was one of those guys who had combinations for sure, and he could get them off. So great point right there, Poland Boss. Cheers there to Boz. Salute to you there, Boz. Dropping in the building there, buddy. Appreciate you. Hey, go check out Boz, folks. You'll give him a subscribe. Boz says, I never get enough of this. No, never, Boz. History time, baby. Cirillis and Dillis, once again, salute to you there, buddy. Appreciate you for sure, my man. Appreciate you. Yeah, we got to talk boxing history there, Boz. You know that was coming right there. That's what this is about, some boxing history here. We get a lot of modern stuff. Sir Lucifer, as far as combination punching is concerned, Ted Kid Lewis is considered by many to be the first combination puncher. Ted Kid Lewis was a very good fighter. And, man, when you look at the experience, the different styles he was in with, I mean, yes, top tier as far as we're concerned with boxers that are out there. I've seen the footage of him and the one guy that I can't think of his name right now, and I've seen him, of course, in there with Carpentier when he gets knocked out. But you can see that was less of him, I guess, combination punching in that fight with the guy Johnny Basham, maybe, or something like that. And you just get to see him operating, both of them operating more at a tactical level. They're looking to get that edge that they can get. But I can see that, though, Sir Lucifer. And we know we had that series with the welterweight there that is top level. I have a video that I started on him. Jack Britton. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to think of. Jack Britton. We know he had that series with him. That's one of the best boxers, one of the more skilled boxers just in general, fighters in history right there. 300 plus fights. We're talking about both of these guys are just on another level in terms of the amount of fights that they had. But Ted Kid Lewis, yeah, he was known to be one of those guys that could throw combinations. As a matter of fact, he could deal with so many different styles right there. Top level cat for sure. We don't have a ton of video on him, unfortunately, but it would be cool to have more on him. But I mentioned this before, working on a video on that series. Matter of fact, I haven't worked on it in a minute, but like halfway through. It's been months, maybe a year since I even brought the script back up again. I should go ahead and finish that, right? So we'll see. We'll see there. A good point bringing up there. Dan says Sullivan was over the hill, bloated, fat alcoholic, and still gave Corbett a good fight. True. Corbett just really dominated in one of the greatest fights in the history in the 61-round drought with Prime Peter Jackson. That's where we may have some different accounts right there, Dan. And I know there were different accounts, but as I understand it, Jackson got the better of Corbett in that contest right there. as I understand it, and it was a draw, but it could have not been a draw from indications right there. But hey, different accounts, different structure, different folks. Slavin, my first name is Slavin. Slavin, Slavin. Yep. So Slavin, that is right there. Maybe you're Australian there, boss. Polomov says, I heard Jackson ankle injury severely impaired him against Corbett, and he was in 2 crutches for the 2 weeks prior to the fight. That could have been the case right there. I'm trying to remember. Was it that? That might have been the case there, Polomov. That might have been the case for sure there. But I had to double back on that. I haven't looked into it in a while. Could have been the first upper bolo punch deserves mention. Seferino, first user of the bolo punch, Seferino Garcia. Seferino. Bolo punch, Seferino Garcia. Great fighter, Cuban fighter right there. Or no, not Cuban, Filipino right there. Yeah, I'm thinking of, who am I thinking of? Gavilan, he could do the bolo too. He was a Cuban fighter. But Seferino Garcia, yeah, he was in there. That's who Henry Armstrong could have won the middleweight title off of. Some argue he did win it, but hey, you never know. But yeah, salute to Seferino Garcia. Salute to those Filipino fighters out there. I believe he's the first Filipino middleweight champion, is what it is. Now Corbett wasn't as popular as Jackson. Had to really lobby to get fight. Jackson couldn't match up well. Corbett was really outboxing. Jackson was really beat up, and Corbett's hands broken. I knew there were detractors of Corbett for sure. I do know that, Dan. I do know that some people did not like Corbett and thought it was snobby. You could argue he was, I guess, in some sense. But, yeah, he certainly wasn't the most popular. That's an interesting one right there. I know I've accounted for it in a video I did on Corbett and maybe Jackson both. But we need to dive back into it. That may be worth a live of its own right there, that Corbett versus Jackson contest right there, Dan, and all the lead up to it and aftermath right there, because a title shot was on the line, or was expected that the winner would take on John L. Sullivan. Ultimately, that did happen, though it wasn't immediately after. Tommy Burns, short guy, but strong guy. Yes, indeed there, Boz. He was 5'7". And, hey, you could get some guys out of there for sure. Pablo beat Jackson, and Martin Buffalo Costello dominated Jackson in Australia. Okay. That was early on. Yeah, Jackson came to a little bit later for sure. I would say that some of those early fights in Jackson, he might have overextended his hand in terms of jumping up in competition maybe far too quicker than what he should have. But, hey, that's what happens. Get schooling is when it happens for sure. Polomov says, I find it difficult to attribute inventing punches to fighters. You can argue that someone popularized the technique, but judging from old manuals and footage of games, etc., suggests it barely changed. Yeah, no, I'm with you there, Polomov. I subscribe to a similar thought in that sense. I think some guys, probably popularized things more. Of course, Jack Dempsey popularized, you could say, combination punches, his offensive style there with the way he operated there in the heavyweight division at the time of the motion picture films or whatnot. But certainly there were guys well before who subscribed to a similar type of fighting style. And we just don't have footage of a lot of those guys, but we do know that they were out there. Think about a guy like George Dixon or whatever, the amount of fights that he was in and how he operated. I mean, you can keep going. You can keep going for sure. But I'm with you there. Just by Paulino Uskadun was definitely one of the toughest small heavyweights ever. Yes, the Basque wood chopper. Certainly he was. There you mentioned Paulino. He was in there with my guy, Max Baer. Matter of fact, beat Max Baer. But Paulino, contender, never got that title shot or could win the title, but I think he couldn't get over the hump to get to the title. Just would lose right there when he was on the cusp. But very good fighter, strong fighter right there as well, and solidly built even for his size there. And of course, we know we have the footage of him knocking out Harry Wills. That was an older, kind of past it, not really very active Harry Wills, but nonetheless, the Spanish fighter was one of the top contenders of his era for sure. a lot like a guy who will be doing a video on and we're going to be working on here very soon. Then coaching is the most important thing in any boxing, football, etc. When Jim Mason went to Australia and met with Larry Foley. Oh, yeah, Larry Foley, top-tier trainer for sure. They took those crazy, tough offenses and turned them into some of the most dominant. Yeah, Larry Foley has got to be argued one of the best trainers of that era right there, just what he was able to do with a lot of those fighters from Australia and think about how they operated when they came to America. Pretty much dominated in a lot of facets. So, yeah, Larry Foley, top-tier guy. And we know of Jim Mace, of course, and him being a bare knuckle champion, all that good stuff. He was one of the best for sure from his period of fighting, and he fought even when he was older as well. So Mace was something else for sure. I watched a video on him not too long ago, a little short YouTube kind of documentary about 20 minutes or so. This was like a couple months back. But salute to Jim Mace, man. Yeah, he really helped to break a number of these stars that came out of Australia, New Zealand, that area. Dan Tommy Bonds was dominant middleweight, went up to heavyweight, champion, successful 13 title defenses, longest streak of KOs in heavyweight title defenses. Yeah, Tommy could do his thing right there. Tommy could hit for sure. Tommy, man, got to give respect to him. Little giant from Hanover, man. He was better than what some give him credit for. And, hey, he lost to Johnson, of course, but he was a traveling heavyweight, one of those that was willing to go to the other heavyweights territories and take their title. Hey, you said you're a champion of France or whatever. I'll go there. I'll fight you, because he was really set on becoming world champion. So I give him props for that. Truly a traveling heavyweight right there. Pulling ball, Johnson had a solid jab across and cross, as well as quick left pincher lunge, which was a punch of his own. He displays those skills best against Ketchel. Yeah, we saw what he could do when he was really going for it there offensively with Ketchel. And, Johnson wasn't going 100% there throughout that fight. And once he really started to put mustard on those punches, once he really wanted to, you saw he was able to knock out Ketchel. I'm of the belief that could have come a lot sooner had he wanted it to, but certainly underrated there, pulling ball. Underrated outside game as well. Certainly. You can see him out there sometimes messing around, holding it jab, just holding it out there, something they don't allow you to do today. You saw him doing that with Fireman Jim Flynn. But I think that, yeah, when he was really on his game, man, he could do it. Combos have existed for as long as the glove boxing has. You can even see Billy Edwards and Mike Donovan demonstrate some. Certainly. I did a little updated version of that video on the channel, as a matter of fact. It's in color. Older Donovan there, but Mike Donovan, another one of those guys who was fighting not only just boxing, but under London prize ring rules, and bare knuckle. So he had a lot of experience, taught a lot of guys, and he knew about combinations for sure. And he's got a lot of cachet in the sport for sure. Bare knuckles make combo punching more dangerous. Certainly there, pulling ball. Great points made there. I've heard very thorough accounts of that Corbett beat Jackson soundly, breaking his ribs and breaking his hands in the process. Jackson was being outboxed and telling Corbett, come on, let's fight, not fancy. All right there, Dan. I'm going to dive into it more. We're going to have to do a show on that for sure, just in itself right there, Dan. When are we going to discuss post-1930s boxers? My knowledge is better there. Oh, we can. Who you want to talk about there, Boz? Finally called it a draw, but too tough to quit. But Jackson had his ribs broken, Corbett's hand broken, but Corbett got the better. All right, Dan. All right. Hey, I'm not saying that you're not. Hey, you could be on to something right there, Dan. Or you might be. I need to look back. Maybe my recollection is off a bit. Maybe my recollection is off. We're gonna find out there, Dan. But no, I'm not doubting it, though. Not doubting you. I know you're on your game, so I'm going to look into it a bit more, for sure. Australia, young Griffo, one of the greatest boxers skill-wise. Certainly. Young Griffo was the featherweight champion there, young Griffo. He had a ton of fights, too. Nearly 200 or somewhere around there, right? Might have had over 200. But, yeah, I know a little bit about young Griffo. I wanted to do a video on him. Well, I've considered it a number of times in the past, just haven't done anything on him as of yet. And I would have found out about his little stint in prison or jail or whatever as well. So interesting guy there, young Griffo. But yeah, at his time, certainly one of the best boxers there in the world, holding it down from Australia. And you had to go through him to get that status there at featherweight. Excuse me, Les Darcy. Certainly, Les Darcy, just Boz mentions, Dan mentioned, yes, awesome. Certainly, Darcy, I think, would have been middleweight champion had he lived beyond 21. And had he had the opportunity to get in the ring there with the likes of Harry Greb or whatnot, that would have been an excellent contest, likely filmed. So I wish we would have gotten that. But I do think Darcy had the ability to become middleweight champion. As a matter of fact, he was in there with a lot of the top-level middleweights in general. And you could argue that the Australian middleweight championship, which he held, might have had a little bit more value at that particular time than the world middleweight title, which was vacated after the death of Stanley Ketchel. So Les Darcy, a name certainly worth mentioning there. Polenbaugh mentions Foley said that he barely had to train Griffo, and Griffo knew how to box as second nature. Awesome. Seems characteristics for an alcoholic who never trained yet arguably beat Gans, Dixon, and McCauley. Good point right there, Polenbaugh. See, I never quite dove into Griffo to know that Foley mentioned that, but that's good to know. Appreciate you there sharing the gem right there. That's what I'm talking about, folks. You come here, you get a lot of good information on history, not just from myself, but from these other individuals here who have dove into the history of the sport and understand the dynamics right there. I love to hear it. I'm learning something as well. But that is some natural talent of Griffo, especially given the amount of fights that he had as well and what he was able to accomplish. To think that he could have even been better had he really focused and trained in that capacity. Man, amazing. Amazing. Oh, yeah, Joe Louis. Yeah, you're right there, Dan. Can never forget. I know I'm a little bit behind here. I'm always behind in these comments right here. Let me see if I can get up there. Blackburn actually tried modeling Lewis after Gans and still saw him as less complete version of Gans. Yeah, indeed. I know of that. Langford thought the same. Certainly. Jack Blackburn, baby. That's one of my favorites right there. Go look up his resume, folks. And you'll see what it is beyond just the training aspect. But yeah, that just speaks volumes of Joe Gans. 101 knockouts as well there, Joe Gans. So he could punch, he could box, he could do it all. He can move. You could just see it. We have film footage of him. Man, you're talking about a special fighter. For my money, the greatest lightweight there in history. And he could have fought, or there might have been an opportunity for him to fight Packy McFarland. There were some things that came into play that ultimately it didn't happen. But you're right there, Polenbaugh shows how great Joe Gans was, the old master. He has most championship wins anyway there. Did you mention there, Boz, or Lewis? I'm thinking, but yeah, certainly. Cerulus Idealist, indeed. It was mainly curious about the heavyweights because I think a lot of the pros versus cons are the bigger fighter versus smaller. Hey, I think we saw Cerulus Idealist, Alexander Usyk. He was able to defeat Tyson Fury. I think that's an example. We know Usyk came up from heavy or cruiserweight, and he went about it the right way, of course, but size was a big factor. Size and his ability to move and box was a big factor in many people holding Fury in high regard, especially comparing him to fighters of the past. You know, the Alis of the world, the Joe Lewises of the world, and all that stuff. It was always the size, but Usyk was able to hurt him. And I know there's the notion of Fury being past it, or that's what some have stated. But it's not the first time that Fury's been hurt by a smaller guy. I can tell you that for sure. So, yeah, sometimes, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. That was a term supposedly coined by Sullivan, but I don't know. Dan says, Harry Lewis, Gans, Frank Aaron, such great boxers. Certainly top-tier lightweights right there. Welterweight for Harry Lewis went on to be recognized, at least, I guess, in some sense, as champion, you could say. Frank Aaron, of course, another guy very familiarized with Joe Gans, of course. Man, great boxers right there. I was going to do a video on Frank Aaron. I need to do that. I like Aaron. He doesn't have a long career in terms of, or a big career in terms of amount of fights, but man, when you look at the fights he did have, he put in that work. This is prehistory. Got you there. The boxing marvel, Jack Britton. Bowling ball. Yes, Griffo's so great. Sometimes drunk at the bar as fights was the beginning. Australian boxing is crazy, but great. Certainly. Hey, salute there to you, Just Frank. Just Frank in the building. Appreciate you there, Just Frank. Yeah, I think you are an Aussie there, Boz. Watch BTR 2 by biography on Jackson. They say they're what happens in the Corbett fight, and they are really promoting Jackson. I think I know which channel you're talking about. They're kind of talking about the thing. I think I know which one you're talking about. I'll check them out for sure there, Dan. I'll check them out. I'll check it out, no doubt. I'm just saying there's a reason Corbett did everything possible not to fight Jackson in 1894, 95. He tried getting the fight made in the South because he knew Jackson didn't want to fight there. He also said he wanted to fight in England, but when Jackson offered, he said he would specifically fight in America. And then Adam Pollock's Corbett book does an excellent job documenting how their negotiations transpired. Corbett was doing everything to avoid Jackson. Oh, yeah, certainly. Certainly when he got that title, I know it was known that he was supposed to earn. I know he was quoted as even saying that he was going to give Jackson a title shot that never materialized, of course. Max Duran, what's going on, buddy? He says, hey, guys, can't stay tonight. Just want to stop by and say hello. God bless everyone. Same to you there, Max. Appreciate you dropping by, buddy, anytime. Hey, good to just have you drop by there. Salute to you there, Max Duran. Dan says, I think Jackson one of the greatest heavyweights to ever enter ring, but Jackson was the star. Corbett was just before his prime, but he did dominate Jackson 61 rounds. Come on, no loser. Hey, it might have been the case there, Dan. Might have very well been the case. All is good there. Let's see. I wonder how many punches per round Joe Giannetti and Sam McVay were throwing at each other in their 49-round fight. Yeah, I'd imagine it was a crazy amount right there. What is the knockdowns were, 21 or something like that? 22, something crazy. Maybe even more than that. But I imagine it probably slowed in some pockets or whatnot, but they were bloodied and sort of beat to death nearly. Had to be administered oxygen, all that good stuff. So one can only imagine. Man, we have pictures of that. What if there's actual footage that is just over there in some basement in France or something? Or in the attic of one of these universities or something. It would be crazy, right? It would be absolutely crazy. But probably the greatest fight in the history of the sport right there. Probably, arguably. But certainly one worth mentioning. Pulling Ball says he didn't dominate Jackson by any accounts. You can argue that Corbett got the better of it, but Jackson's ankle injury was quite well documented, and even he held his own. It was competitive. Got you there, Pulling Ball. Got you there for sure. Yeah, my accounts were that it was closer, but there were some that argued that Jackson got the better of Corbett. That would speak volumes with an injury too, Sir Lucifer Corbett in his memoir stated that Jackson, on the night he fought him, could have beaten any heavyweight in history. Apparently, he was the most skillful fighter Corbett ever fought in his career. There you go right there, Sir Lucifer. Yeah, I'd imagine. And if this is the injured version of him, that's even crazier right there, just thinking about it from that standpoint. So very interesting right there. But Jackson, man, yeah. They were touting him as being the most skilled for sure. They were recognized. And I remember, I did a video on Demered Martin, who was considered to be a skilled heavyweight. And there were people in referencing Demered Martin saying that he was the most skilled heavyweight they'd seen, or just fighter in general, not even just heavyweight, but the most skilled fighter that they'd seen since Peter Jackson of Australia. So, hey, that shows you Jackson was something else for sure. Corbett wanted to fight much more than Jackson did. Much more than Jackson did in the 6th round, but Jackson's ankle also started bleeding at that point, and he was immobile. Okay, gotcha right there, bowling ball. Broccoli boy, hey, what's going on? Appreciate you dropping in. Jack Johnson was great for his time, but I don't think he would do well with today's amateurs. Hey, I don't know. You never know. Think different thing. It's almost a different sport at this particular time. It's pretty much a different sport. So I don't think today's amateurs would do well in his time. For sure. Different sport there, buddy. Today's amateur. Yeah, right there. What Poland Ball said. For sure. A few films on Darcy. Hey, Joshua Woods, what's going on there, buddy? Appreciate you dropping in. Good to have you here in the mix, of course. Plenty to chat about, talking history, all that good stuff. But yeah, some nice films on Darcy for sure. Man, you can just see how good he was. I mean, let's think about that. He hadn't even hit his prime yet. We have film of him, and you can see, man, that he was a special fighter for sure. Very special fighter. Bearcat Wright and George Godfrey are also very good. Certainly there. I know less about Bearcat Wright, though I do know him. But George Godfrey, both George Godfreys were pretty solid. That's the original George Godfrey from the late 1800s, as well as the early 1900s George Godfrey, the bigger, stronger heavyweight, of course, who was about 6'3", 250. Man, he was a handful. We got video of him out there. But yeah, the original George Godfrey, man, he was a very nice special fighter as well. So good points right there, Boz. Polo Ball, Dan said Polo Ball, both were in San Francisco, and Jackson had the high-class boxing gym. Corbett was just coming up and had the lobby to get Jackson to fight him. Interesting there. Dan, Joshua Woods, I give Johnson time to learn the modern game, learn the rules, and what style would suit him. He could do great. He did have the talent. I'd agree there, Joshua Woods, most certainly. I think, yeah, it's a matter of the eras, because certainly it would be a different style of fighting right now here in this particular day in terms of that he'd be dealing with. But yeah, you give him that opportunity and time, legit. And he trained with and worked with some of the best during his period there, guys who were highly skilled, top level as well. You know, he trained with some of these guys, the McVeys, the Denver Ed Martins, etc. Joe Jeanette, even though they fought and all that stuff, these guys trained together too. That is true, and it's very likely the fight was declared no contest so the Jackson gym mates wouldn't have to lose their bets. That's what Corbett thought, at least. Got you there, got you. Ricky Steamboat, lots of respect to the words of the past, but the sport has evolved too much. Cheers there, Ricky Steamboat. Appreciate you dropping by. I think the sport has evolved from a safety standpoint, most certainly. So when you look at it from that standpoint, that is definitely the case. It is a lot safer. It's a lot more safer sport than what it was at that particular time. And you could say it's evolved from in terms of how it's operated. Yes, it's operated. Some of the standards and rule sets definitely has evolved from that standpoint. But certainly a fighter of the past, I mean, the conditions they were dealing with compared to today is night and day. So yeah, you can say it's evolved from a condition standpoint as well. Whether or not that makes a better fighter, I'm not sure. But there are some parallels that, you know, tie together for both eras or all eras in some sense. But certainly tougher conditions that they were dealing with back then. Tougher conditions, no doubt about it. Post-1930s boxing from Rocky Marciano is king, and how many trends he has. Yep, boxing forums, Rocky Marciano. Oh, yeah, certainly. Got you there, Joshua Woods. Corbett is very underrated, very tough era. Was like Ali, very beautiful and braggadocious to promote. Certainly there, Dan. There's no question about that. No question about it, Dan. He was in that sense in terms of, he was a braggadocious guy, without a doubt. I saw that movie by Errol Flynn where Errol Flynn played him, and I mentioned that a little while back. And I thought it was a very good movie. And I thought it was kind of spot on with some stuff, and even some of the accounts as well. So, yeah, Corbett, he was one of those guys, braggadocious, cocky, all that good stuff. And he could back it up, he could get in there and back it up. Ezra Charles, in my opinion, was the best between 1940 and 1950. Boz threw it out there. Yeah, Ezra was no doubt a beast right there. You just think about him. Certainly one of the more underrated fighters in terms of what we're just talking about, historic greats and all that stuff. He gets mentioned at times, but certainly not as often as he probably should. Especially if you think about him competing from middleweight up to heavyweight. Some of the names he was in there with: Rocky Marciano, Charlie Burley, Archie Moore. I mean, it goes on and on. A number of the Black Murderers Row guys. Archie Moore, man, hell of a fighter for sure. So good nod there. The Cincinnati Cobra there, Bob. Hey, you can make an argument for sure. You could certainly make an argument what he was able to do. He arguably or probably shouldn't have been at heavyweight, but he went there, of course, and hey, that's what he had to do. Get the big money fights right there. Move to heavyweight. Joshua Wood says, I think Fitz and Jeffries losses hurt Corbett's legend somewhat. Yeah, you could argue for sure. Certainly, Fitz stopping him. Now, Corbett was doing fairly well, from my understanding, especially in that first contest with Jeffries. If they fought twice, I think they fought twice. But apparently, Corbett was doing well with him, and then ultimately was knocked out. But yeah, then we saw what happened with him, and he was doing pretty decent with Corbett until he actually had dropped Corbett, but then he got caught that solar plexus punch, and it was over. So yeah, you could argue that for sure there, Joshua Woods. Stanley Ketchel, what a loss. Oh yeah, Stanley Ketchel, yeah, he was top tier in terms of big time puncher right there. The legend may be better than the fighter as well in terms of Stanley Ketchel and some of the mentions and all, but most certainly he was a top level fighter for sure. And hey, we got some pretty solid fights on film there. Let me see. Great, great. Greater no lower there. Well, Ketchel was trying to pick up the other man's wife, so that's what cost him. Yeah, that's pretty crazy what happened to him. The situation, they were at a friend's place too. It's let me see. I know I'm behind to get a good deal. Just by as mentioned, the guy that stopped Ketchel got stopped by him, Billy Pafke, Illinois Thunderbolt. Yeah, Pafke, hey, hell of a fighter right there. Tough guy. Sure. He was famous as they come, just by, yeah. Ketchel was an icon in his day. Yep. Bigger they are, the harder they fall. As Simmons wasn't Fury dropped by Cunningham too. Yep. Hey, don't be a sucker. Hey, what's going on? Don't be a sucker. Yep, he was dropped by Cunningham. So Fury had been hurt by smaller guys before, so I don't think it was necessarily Fury passed it or whatnot. No, he's been hurt before by smaller guys. So Cunningham, never a big heavyweight, probably shouldn't have been operating at heavyweight realistically. But hey, if you got what it takes, you can go up there and do your thing. He was able to drop Fury. So, hey, you're right there. Jim Jeffries knocked out Corbett. Yep. To be fair, Corbett was champ and did have the power to determine skills. I think Jackson should have just accepted terms. It needs to be. Yeah, hey, you could argue that for sure there, Joshua Woods. He could have just accepted those terms. But yeah, they did clinch a lot there. Don't be a sucker. I don't understand why they put themselves through all of that for a non-title fight. Above average. Hey, what's going on there, buddy? Appreciate you dropping by here. I saw you come in a little bit earlier. Yeah, hey, you had to do what you got to do. I guess you're looking at those dreams of getting to that next level. His awesome body shot was way ahead of the era. Jeffrey's greatest heavyweight ever. So once again, great era. That was a great era, no doubt about it there. Peter Jackson, Jeffries knocked him out while Sullivan wouldn't fight him. Yeah, that was a Jackson that was past it. You know, he died of tuberculosis there, boss. That was a Jackson that was past it at that particular time. But that being said, hey, still win a notch on the belt of Jeffries for sure. Jeffries, great for his time, a great athlete for his time. No doubt about it there, Ricky Steamboat. He was, most certainly. Most certainly. Jeffries, hey, he can get a bit underrated in that sitting, but man, had supreme endurance, especially given his size, a muscular guy, but hey, it was nothing for him to go the distance. If you look at the likes of some of those fights, he was knocking those guys out later in rounds. He was able to outlast the likes of Corbett, who's a lighter guy and all that stuff. So, man, got to give it to Jim Jeffries, certainly one of those guys who was a supreme athlete for sure. Jeffries knocked out an expired Corbett. Got you there above average with the strongest boxer all the time. Or is it Jim Jeffries versus Jack Johnson? Yeah, that would have been nice in their primes. Both of them in their prime there, gaming with Fly Hopper. Of course, what we saw was definitely fool's errand there on Jeffries' part. Corbett was way ahead against Jeffries Fitzsimmons until night. Great era. Certainly. Yeah, I remember that. So Corbett, hey, he could box pretty well. Retirement against Johnson. Yep. Yeah. Johnson blocked a lot of punches. He rarely slip punches. Yep, indeed. Terrell's ideal often said modern nutrition and training would have made past fighters much bigger, but I bet the old school greats wouldn't want to be bigger. They just be able to train even harder without overtraining. Yeah, hey, you could argue such for sure there. You could argue such for sure there, Surrealist idealists. I think, yeah, some of them, probably wouldn't have wanted to bulk up too much, and they didn't really teach that bulking up like that in the sport of boxing in a sense there in the past. Dion Chubb. Hey, what's going on, Dion? Salute to my guy Dion there. Said 90s, what if Tyson versus Vo? That would have been an amazing one right there. Yeah, especially 90s, depending on the headspace of Tyson, he came out gunning. Then he would have had Bo gunning. I'm a fan of man, I like both of them. Fan of Tyson for sure. I like both of them, man. That would have been a tough one there, Diaz, but hey, it would have been tough. That's a tough one to call right there. 90s version. Yeah, I think that Tyson could definitely hurt him, but I think Bo could hurt Tyson as well. Man, any given night right there, Dion. Any given night, any given night. I might lean my guy Tyson, but slightly, depends on the headspace he's in, of course. And I guess you could argue the same with Bo. If Bo motivated, ready to go, then man, his size and speed and his power could factor in as well. I think it'll be an excellent matchup. I'm probably gonna lean my guy Tyson, but with caution for sure. With caution there, Dion. Fitzsimmons put an echo of brutal beating on Jeffries before KO. Rumor loaded plaster Paris gloves on Fitzsimmons. Oh, you think so there? I didn't know about that one, Dan. Fitz, man, he could always punch. I know about that one. The modern nutrition, available medicine, and equipment is part of the reasons today's fighters are better, but the big one is just the amount of time that has passed. Yeah, I guess you could argue such Ricochet. Yeah, I think that all factors in. But like I said, the conditions, I think, are certainly very much in favor of athletes and fighters of today, which is to be expected. I mean, you have these things that could better suit the sport, better suit the athlete, then you have to take advantage of them. Some of this stuff just wasn't available then. But yeah, to throw a fighter of today back in that time, dealing with the same conditions, say you're in a 45 rounder, yeah, you're in for a world of hurt. I mean, those guys back then were skilled, just as skilled. If you think about it, there are not a lot of, when you think about boxing technique-wise, there are not really any new inventions coming about. Nobody's inventing new stuff in the sport of boxing in that sense. You could probably see some techniques evolve in some sense, maybe slightly or whatever, but you had all types of fighters even back in the day, just as, and probably even more so because it was more of a crowded field back then, especially to get to a championship. Then you had no choice but to go through the best of the best. There are no alphabet belts, any of that stuff. So I think that factors in somewhat. The use of the jab and modern use of defense with the hands, not just head movement, is also a big factor. Yeah, hey, some guys were doing that back then too. There were guys doing that back then. I did a video on Packy McFarland. That's what he was known for. On the defensive side, his use of the jab, all that stuff. We have some video of him. You think about some of the boxers of the past. Hey, there are boxers out there that are like that. Look at a guy like did a video on him, Charlie Burley. You look at Charlie Burley, and then you tell me a modern fighter who's evolved to such a degree that Charlie Burley wouldn't be a factor in there with him. That's the way I look at it. Charlie Burley, he had pretty much everything these modern guys had, and we only have a slight bit of footage on him, So it could certainly be a thing. Above average, Bo would beat 90s Tyson. Hey, you might be right there, above average. That's what I'm saying. It's hard to call it, but yeah, Bo 90s Tyson. Yeah, Bo would have been a handful for sure there. Above average, I agree with you. It would have been a handful, no doubt. Sadly, Sullivan's belt was melted down for spare parts and may have been in better hands had he given it to Corbett. Yeah, that is true, Joshua Woods. And I know at one point they only had like a little replica. But yeah, it's unfortunate that Sullivan, how it ended up for him. And yeah, and that being Yeah, the title being melted down. It's crazy, you know. It's absolutely crazy to think about it, you know. But hey, at the time, you know, you're just going through life and you're probably not thinking at least this far ahead, you know. Charles handled more better than anybody. Yeah, yep. That is right there, boss. Hey, and he handled Charlie Burley too, you know, at middleweight. Man, he handled Charlie Burley for sure. So you got to give it to Edward, man. He was a beast. Jeffries beat Fitzsimmons long before Fitz fought Johnson. Yes, he was old, but he had butchered Rulin and Sharkey before fighting Jeffries and would go on to beat O'Brien and Gardner. Oh, yeah. It is right. Became light heavyweight champion. He beat Gardner, right? Or was it before that? Or yeah, I thought it was Gardner who he won the title off of. But no, good point there. Poland Ball. Cyrilus Ideal, as a Marciano fan, I think Jersey Joe Walcott, Edgar Charles, and Archie Moore are even more underrated than the great Sonny Liston, Larry Holmes, and Michael Spinks. Argument could be made there. Sonny Liston, I think, is vastly underrated there. My fellow Arkansan right there. He did a lot after the Ali losses that kind of go unnoticed for sure. But hey, certainly those guys are underrated. Walcott, tough career. Did some tough fights and all that stuff. Held his own for sure. And did amazing, you could say. Don't let the record fool you. Archie Moore, my eyes, the greatest light heavyweight of all time. Some others in the running there, but just one of the great fighters in general of all time. The great Archie Moore. I mean, there's rare territory, and you're thinking of names like that. Stanley fan here, above average. Stanley Keschel, yeah, hey, Stanley, man, he was a puncher for sure. We could see him in there with Papke. He had some other good contests. We know that he was in there with Sam Langford. They were supposed to have a title fight at some point. That would have been amazing, especially to think of it potentially being on film. So, man, yeah, Stanley Keschel, one of the guys worth mentioning. And when you think about historic fighters, especially the historic middleweights, he always ranks up there for sure. Deservedly. He thought was killed by Hudson, his wife, who was trying to rob him. You know, I've heard varying accounts there as well, above average. I did a video, and in a video that I did that was speaking on it, I had one of those accounts where, yeah, it might have been tied to that. Yeah, there's some varying accounts that are out there. I know it was someone and their wife, at least undercover, and he didn't know it was their wife or something, what I heard or what I read in something else as well. But I don't know. There's a lot of mystery surrounding that still right there, as far as I'm concerned, above average in the Stanley Keschel death. Poland Ball says also the jab he used to perfection by technicians from the early eras like Gaines, Donovan, and Edwards, to name a few. Certainly there, Poland Ball. Certainly. Yay, you're speaking the truth right there. Let me see. Fitzsimmons dominated heavyweight, middleweight eras. Yep. Certainly, Ricky Steamboat. Fitzsimmons was a dangerous man first time. Many killed in those eras were far fewer stoppages. Oh, yeah. Certainly. Hey, they could let you take all types of damage then. They weren't really stopping them like that. All right, Joshua Woods, have a good one there, buddy. Pulling ball. Corbett may not look very impressive from the film on the technical perspective, but he was a speed freak like Ali Jones, who had technical flaws or too fast to get caught. Oh, yeah, good stuff there. Yeah, man. Yeah, Corbett, man, he was certainly a skilled fighter. It wasn't just all pop, no doubt about it there, Poland Ball. Judging from how Tunney and Lockhart interacted with Corbett as an old man, it appears his boxing IQ was excellent. Yeah, I have no doubt about it there. If you really look at it, and he was able to traverse, you know, multiple eras in some sense, you know, 1800s, then fought in the 1900s, had success, even at an older age right there, you know, so clearly, man, his IQ was on point. He had something about him for sure that most don't have. He's in there holding his own. Tunney couldn't believe it. Oh, yeah. Hey, man, good stuff right there. Corbett died a few years later. Corbett did a few years later. Would have been amazing to see 90s Tyson, 90s George Foreman. Yeah, that would have been a banger right there. Cyrilus, I mean, somebody was probably going to go down, get knocked out. Tony said that Corbett was even faster, more clever than beating Leonard. Yeah, interesting right there. Interesting. That's high regard right there for sure. Just by John Henry Lewis, an outstanding light heavyweight. Certainly one that goes underrated right there for sure. John Henry Lewis, man, yeah, top tier. This is the guy that apparently is from the family lineage of LL Cool J. I know we were talking about that on the stream before, but yeah, John Henry Lewis doesn't get much mention. Former world light heavyweight champion, very good fighter, technically sound, all of that. And unfortunately, we don't really have footage of him like that. I know there's a little bit out there. And then, of course, you see him getting knocked out by Joe Louis. But yeah, man, very underrated fighter for sure. Hey, speaks to James J. Braddock, was able to defeat him. And hey, that shows you Braddock, man. He was tough for sure. And a little better than people may think. Foreman for the 70s destroys Tyson like nothing. The old Foreman would beat him, but Tyson wouldn't fight him or anybody. I got you there. That's just ridiculous. From all the available film, more likely people were just being generous when it came to Corbett and legends from that time. Well, as it relates to Corbett, what in particular there, Steamboat? I lean towards Bo too big, too strong, not chitty, too much for Tyson. Got you there, Boz. Yeah, that would have been an interesting one. How ridiculous would Titty himself emphasize Corbett's cleverness on plenty of occasions, and from a fish head viewpoint, it's not like he was basing his opinion on literature. Oh, you're talking about Tony mentioning that about Corbett. Okay, gotcha. Oh yeah, there is a little footage of them out there for sure. Yeah, I've seen it. And not only Tony Lochran as well. Tommy Lochran. Hey, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. That footage right there. I don't know all the accounts of what they stated, but I do know what you're talking about there. Tony and Lochran, great. No doubt about it, Dan. No doubt. Two great light heavyweights for sure, and beyond actually. Mickey Walker. What about him? Mickey Walker, man. Amazing fighter to watch there. In terms of the grit, the tenacity that you wanted to see, a guy who would bring it down the fight, welterweight and middleweight champion. Man, hey, he was an amazing fighter right there. Just buys Mickey Walker, one of the guys that you just look at him on film, man, to just see him in there with guys, him knowing that he was a welterweight and seeing him fighting at heavyweight. It's crazy. See him in there. They got the footage of him with Sharkey and Max Smelling. And you get to see Max Smelling. He gets stopped. But, hey, you got to give him props for being in there, trying to bang it out with the big guys. And, hey, gave Sharkey a run. A pretty nice run. But I think Mickey Walker, excellent fighter. One that's pleasing to watch. You want to see a guy who's about that action, who's offensive. Hey, doesn't really care about what's coming back defensively like that. Just as game as they get. Toy Bulldog in general. The name is fitting there, Boz. Sonny Liston was a monster there. Ricky Steamboat, I've never seen film of Corbett looking overly impressive. No, I feel you there, Ricky Steamboat. I feel you for sure. Two of the greatest light heavyweight technicians of the 20s. Both account for Corbett as a clever technician. That's enough evidence for me. Hey, I feel you there for sure. Benny Leonard looked impossible to outbox against Lou Tindler. Yeah, hey, I agree. Yeah, Leonard was on his game right there. And Tindler was trying, Lefty Lou was trying to catch him with something big. And, really didn't find a ton of success overall. Leonard was amazing for sure. Now, I don't know how much of it could have been in hyperbole. Sometimes that's the case with some of these accounts or whatnot. But no doubt, having the nod from Lochran and Tunney is high regards for sure. Tunney lost one pro fight, of course, to Greb. He lost one amateur fight to Lochran for a military champion, Lochran and Tunney Marine. Oh, yeah, certainly. Yep. Yeah, I have a little bit on that Greb loss. Hey, arguably a couple other losses in there with Greb too there, Dan. That's arguably, though. Arguably for sure. But Tunney, the fighting Marine. You think Marine Corps boxing, James J. Tunney or whatever, Gene Tunney. And the fighting Marine, Stephanie Simon. That's what I think when I think Marine Corps boxing. Let's see what comes to mind there. I don't find Corbett looks impressive either, but also no fighters have stinkers all the time. That Corbett to have stood the test of time as he did must be something special. Yeah, it's true. That is saying something. I'd love to see Tunney versus Corbett. That'd be an interesting one right there. I'd favor Tunney, but be an interesting one. Certainly be an interesting one, especially since Boxing Society still regarded Corbett highly by the 30s, and he should have been obsolete by that point. It was only based his technique from the film we have. True. Pull them all. Even Professor Donovan and Edwards look like better technicians than Corbett on film, and they predate him by 30 years. Yeah, that is true. They are very tactical and technical in there. Tunney and Lochner are both very intelligent. I don't doubt it. However, being over generous towards a legend is extremely likely, opposed to Corbett being this guy when he never looked overly crazy. Yeah, the visuals can sometimes be deceiving. I agree with both points you all have made. Yeah, some of it could have been in hyperbole, as mentioned. I don't know. But Corbett was a technician for sure. He was regarded for his skill set and his technique for sure. They had a little manual when he was working with the military. I know there was a manual created as well on like combative techniques that was based on Corbett, or I could be thinking of Fitzsimmons, or maybe even both of them. We barely have any Corbett footage, and that fight is one where he had only fought 4 rounds in 5 years. Corbett was a fighter who relied on speed more than he did fundamentals. That is true early on. Yeah, he was very on and off in the latter stages of his career in terms of fighting, but he did do a number of exhibition-style contests. I do recall that. Some fighters just don't translate well into higher division. That is true. Right there, Boz. Crazy, yes. Toy Bulldog, indeed. I believe that he stopped Mike Mateague, a world heavyweight champion, in 1 round. Oh, yeah, Mike Mateague. Yeah, tough fighter right there. I think there's a little footage of Mateague out there as well. He's got an excellent resume. I did a video on someone recently who was in there with Mateague, but I can't think of who it is. But anyway, yeah, hey, great name right there. Boz shows you Mickey Walker, beast. I'd say quite comfortably Leonard looked better against McLennan than Corbett did in his footage, and Benny hadn't fought in a long time to that point. Yeah, argument could be made for sure. Footages and everything. Many fighters who look bad on film beat the tar out of fighters that look better. Corbett's strength lies in his speed, and that's how he was able to get away with this flaw. Yeah, that's true. Poland ball. Look up Corbett on Cyber Boxing Zone. Lots of details. He fought hundreds of exhibitions against great. Yeah, true stuff right there, Dan. You mentioned right there. I know you pointed that out before, but yeah, Corbett had a lot of those exhibitions in between. Yeah, in terms of official fights, he didn't have too many. I really wish Harry Wills could have fought Jack Dempsey. Man, that would have been a hell of a fight right there. Cyrilus Idyllis. I would have been looking forward to that one because it would have been filmed, and we were almost there. And I would say that Dempsey's team did not want it. Dempsey could have pressed the issue more, sure. His team certainly didn't want it. Jack Kern certainly didn't want that contest to happen. Tex Rickard didn't want it at first, or at least didn't want to do it, but then came to. I think the issue could have been pressed a bit more there, Cyrilus Idyllis, and I think would have had an excellent heavyweight matchup. Both had avenues to win. I'd favor Wills, but both had avenues to win, and I'm a fan of both of the fighters right there. Of course, you know, I've done a number of things on Jack Dempsey. That would have been an excellent one. The Cyrilus, Poland ball, Tunney and Lochner went into detail on Corbett's cleverness. If you want to argue over generosity, you should read what they said. Too detailed for mere kindness. Gotcha. All I'm saying is I don't see him looking extraordinarily fast. I think he was known to be fairly fast, and maybe some of that was timing. Yet every person who's ever interacted with Corbett agrees that he was ridiculously speedy. Look up the footage of the 6-year-old Corbett keeping up with Tunney and sparring to see my point. Yeah, but bold Mike Mateague, another forgotten old-time light heavyweight champion. Indeed, there, Boz. I need to get more on Mateague. But, yeah, Mateague, man, tough resume right there. Old champion, been there with some top-level comp. One certainly worth mentioning. Just Boz. The eye test is usually nonsense and doesn't reflect how a fighter fought. True. Hey, if you went by the eye test and that little footage we have of Harry Grab, then people downplay him all the time. Back then, light heavies were treated like the heavyweight opening act second rate. Yeah, got you there, boss. Got you. The light heavyweight. Well, now we have cruiserweight in between that, but it doesn't get quite the shine of the light heavyweights who are now highly regarded. Poland Ball would be like judging Greb solely from his sparring and shadow boxing footage. Oh yeah, I'm in agreement there with you, Poland Ball. Yeah, that footage can be deceiving in itself. What we know is what Greb was able to do. We can look at that resume and know what he was able to accomplish, and know that he was top tier as it pertained to what he was able to accomplish in the sport, with arguably the best, the greatest resume in the history of boxing, second for some, but between him and Langford, as far as I'm concerned, a whole Greb up there, no doubt about it. The eye test, I've been watching boxing since the early 90s. I'd say what you see with your eyes means something. Yeah, it can certainly mean something to certain degrees and all that stuff, for sure. Okay, guys, gotta go. But thank you for this, Joshua. Very fun. Indeed. Volleyball, Corbett also beat Charlie Mitchell, Dummy McCaffrey. Yep, good fighters. Jake Kilrain, Chilinski. Yep. Mostly KOs. Martin Buffalo Costello, who beat up Jackson. Oh, yeah. Those some excellent wins right there on Corbett's tally, for sure. Charlie Mitchell, middleweight, came up. Turned out to be a very solid heavyweight. Very good boxer. Fast guy, can move well. Dominic McCaffrey, top-level contender from that time, for sure. McCaffrey fought Sullivan. The American heavyweight title was on the line. Sullivan got the dub, of course, but McCaffrey was in there with some pretty solid guys. Then we know Kilrain, and I hold Trowicki in high regards, one of the greatest light heavyweights we've seen ever. And he went on the heavyweight as well, but just in general, man, a guy that could have been light heavyweight champion of the world, who goes underrated as far as I'm concerned as well there, Joe Trowicki. And not when it comes to old fighters who barely have any footage themselves fighting, you can't actually draw conclusions on their styles from a bit of footage. I'd agree right there, for sure, there, Poland Ball. You certainly can't compare them to 90s fighters that have ridiculous amount of footage compared to Corbett. I'd agree there, Poland Ball, for sure. Some of those guys, you don't really have much footage of them, or any at all, so you can take into account the different writings, things that were written about them in terms of newspaper articles, etc., magazines. There were different pieces that were done on them. Some a little bit of footage, some you have pictures, but even those can be deceiving in a sense in terms of how they look technique-wise, in terms of what stance they're in. But certainly it's one that always brings to mind, several thoughts in terms of seeing if drawing conclusions on a word from people who respected the man very much. Oh, yeah. That no doubt. Down around the eye test gives you an idea how someone with little footage fought, but you can't paint a complete picture with that. Yeah, certainly. Yeah, it's hard to know. Yeah, I get what you're saying there too, Ricky Steamboat. Yeah, I don't know. Some of it could have been in the hyperbole. I don't know. I need to see this for sure there to read it myself. But hey, we know that Corbett, was a great fighter during his time, and you had a lot who held him in high regards, even the accounts going back. So, he made a name in the sport for sure, and been a lot of great guys there in the history. What we're talking about here today, and we're at an hour and a half. Gonna have to call it a night because I know that the NBA playoffs is on, or the playoffs are on, and we have what could ultimately be the final game tonight, Boston, Dallas. Some people probably would have checked it out, all that good stuff, but always good to talk a little boxing history. More to come there, folks. More to come for sure. So, this was a good discussion. I appreciate everyone who dropped in. We got to do this again. Like talking history. This was just a kind of open discussion on any history. If we have some other topics we can throw out there, and we can do that as well. I know Old School Boxing wants to do Jake LaMotta. I got to get some others on. Poland Ball, you got to hit me up. Jake LaMotta. We got to talk Jake LaMotta, man. Come on to a live so we can talk Jake LaMotta. Appreciate you, Cirillos Idealist. Thank you to everyone who contributed there. Great discussions. More discussions to come, folks. Appreciate you all.